We are now live.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of the County of Haliburton Land Division Committee to order at 1 o'clock. My name is Bob Snyder, and I'm the Deputy Chair of the Land Division Committee and public member for the Municipality of Highlands East. Our Chair, Liz Danielson, was unable to join us today. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the other members of the Land Division Committee. Tammy McKelvey, Councillor at Large for Minden Hills. Pat Kennedy, public member representing Dysart et al., and Bill Donald, public member representing the County of Haliburton. Also joining us today are members of county staff, including Secretary Treasurer Kim Bishop and our Director of Planning, Elizabeth Purcell. We acknowledge that this meeting is being held in accordance with both the Planning Act and the Municipal Act. We begin by respectfully acknowledging that the County of Haliburton is located on Treaty 20 Michi-Sagi territory and in the traditional territory of the Michi-Sagi and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations. We acknowledge a shared presence of Indigenous nations throughout the area and recognize its original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest or conflict of interest for today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll proceed with the agenda. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated? Moved by Member Donald, seconded by Member Kennedy.
Moved by Member Donald, seconded by Member Kennedy. Be it resolved that the April 13th, 2026 Land Division Committee agenda be hereby approved. Pardon me.
All in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. The next item is the adoption of the minutes from the Land Division Committee meeting held on February 9th, 2026. May I have a mover and a seconder? Member McKelvey moves. Member Kennedy, second.
Moved by Member McKelvey, seconded by Member Kennedy. Be it resolved that the minutes of the Land Division Committee meeting held February 9th, 2026 be approved as printed and circulated.
All in favor? And the motion carries. We will now proceed with the hearing of applications under the Planning Act. For each file, staff will provide a summary of the application and their recommendation. Committee will then have the opportunity to ask questions of staff to gain a broader understanding of the application. The applicant or agent will then have a chance to speak, followed by any members of the public wishing to comment. Each participant will be provided 5 minutes to speak to the committee and respond to questions raised. Following all submissions related to an application, the committee will deliberate and make a decision which may be subject to appeal as provided under the Planning Act. The first applications on the agenda are file numbers H4125, H4225, and H4325 for the creation of new lots for the lands of Hicks. I now invite Kim Bishop, Senior Planner, to present the staff report.
Thank you, Deputy Chair Snyder. I'm just going to share my presentation with the committee. Okay. I'm assuming the committee is able to see my screen. Perfect.
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. So our first 3 applications today are for a single subject property. So we have one landowner who's looking to do 3 severances in a row. This property is located in part of Lot 26, Concession 1 in the geographic township of Minden, in the township of Minden Hills. The property location is, it's a piece of vacant land, but it's located at the intersection of Lachlan Road and Warder Road. This is sort of just sort of in the area of the hamlet of Lachlan. As I mentioned, the proposal is to create 3 new rural residential lots, and Further to that, the county official plan designation here is rural lands. The Minden Hills official plan designation here is rural, and the zoning for these properties are rural. There's a couple of different moving parts with this proposal, kind of three pertinent ones. One is mineral aggregate resources in the area. The other are the environmental considerations of the property. And then there's also some adjacent agricultural uses that need to be taken into consideration. So what I'll do is I'm going to give the committee just a brief overview of each of the three lots, their sort of statistics, and the retained lands, and then I'll go into a discussion of the policy considerations. All right. So lot number 1 is located at the corner of Lachlan Road and Warder Road. It's 1.1 hectares in area. So for those who use Imperial, that's 2.75 acres. The development envelope on this property is a little over 4,100 square meters or 0.4 hectares or an acre. There's 134 meters of frontage on Lachlan Road with 83 meters of frontage on Warder Road. Access is proposed to come from Lachlan Road rather than Warder Road. There is a wetland located on this property. It's in the southeast corner. This map is not oriented north-south, so that will be confusing. But basically, it's the corner at the intersection of Warder Road and Lachlan Road. That small wetland feature has a 30-meter development setback or a buffer that's recommended by the environmental impact study that was prepared by Cambium Incorporated. There's also a wetland feature on the retained lands and a little bit on lot 2 that also kind of has a 30-meter buffer onto there. So the setback is, I've highlighted it in green. It was a little bit more of a subdued kind of tan color. So just for the purposes of the presentation, I've shown where that line is so that the committee can see sort of where that constraint is. The area on that parcel that is highlighted in sort of a lighter tan color is the developable area of that property. There you go.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Are we all good, Member Donald?
Yeah, sorry, it just went blank on me. Apologize.
That's okay. No worries. Do you need me to reiterate or are we good to keep going?
No, keep going.
Okay. We'll move to lot 2. This is the center lot of the 3. So the frontage here is on Warder Road. It's 83 meters. The access is proposed to be from Warder Road. There's a wetland located on kind of the north portion of this lot. And that wetland plus its 30-meter setback take up almost about half of the lot's area. And that setback line, again, is delineated kind of in the brighter green. The developable area of this parcel is a little bit smaller, about 3,300 square meters, which is about 0.8 acres. Finally, our lot number 3, it's the same size. They're all 1.11 hectares or 2.75 acres. This one has the most constrained development envelope with a little less than 1,300 square meters in area. This is due to the location of the wetland on both this parcel and the retained lands. When we apply that 30-meter setback to it, the development envelope shrinks fairly considerably. But again, the tan area outlined on there is going to be where you would be able to put your house, your services, so well and wastewater being your septic system, your driveway access, any amenity areas or parking would all fit into this space. And then there's the retained lands. So this is 15, almost 16 hectares in area, which is a little less than 40 acres. The development envelope here is a little bit more than a hectare, 1.12 hectares or 2.77 acres. This has 152 meters of frontage on Warder Road and 345 meters of frontage on Lachlan Road. The frontage on Warder Road is mostly wetland features, so you wouldn't be able to use that for access. As such, proposed access is going to be coming in off of Lachlan Road. So there is a large wetland feature on the lot. I have sort of outlined it with its buffer, so that's kind of the developable area outside of it in the green. The other sort of feature that you may see on this one is that we do have a pink line coming in there. That's the area where we're 300 meters from a primary aggregate deposit. So the official plan requires that we're 300 meters from those deposits, so that if they were to ever be developed for a pit, you would kind of have an adequate separation. And then there is a sort of a light gray outline. See if I can just mouse along here. And this is a minimum distance separation formula setback. This is because there's an adjacent farm. It's not an active farm. There's a livestock barn on an adjacent property. And the Ministry of Agriculture has a program called the MDS, the minimum distance setback formula, and that's the setback. Fortunately for the applicants, in the case of the MDS setback, that area again is encumbered with wetland. It wasn't developable anyway. So your area in tan up along Lachlan Road would be where you would be locating your dwelling, your garage, your septic, your well, all the fun stuff. All right, I'm going to get into policy. So we're going to look at rural lot creation policy. So the county official plan permits 3 severed plus 1 retained lot for a total number of 4 lots from an original parcel. That minimum lot area is 0.8 hectares or 2 acres. In a rural land where you're not waterfront, we're going to want to see that access via public road. Not an issue here. We're on 2 public roads. The Minden Hills official plan permits 4 severed plus 1 retained lot. This is a conformity issue with the local plan. If you've looked at the pre-consultation comments, that was what they were requesting initially. Following the consultation with the county after the fact, they did revise their proposal to 3 lots, which ended up, working out because that other lot did end up being sort of mostly encumbered by that setback to the barn and a wetland. So the minimum lot area in the Minden Hills plan is 1 hectare with 60 meters of road frontage. It conforms to that. So from kind of the strict size and frontage requirements of the official plan, these properties are considered to be compliant. So environmental protection. So this property is located just west of the right wetland. This is a provincially significant wetland. And sort of just as a reminder to the committee, a provincially significant wetland is a wetland that's considered to have sort of special ecological features that require enhanced protection. The county's official plan basically requires a minimum setback distance of 120 meters from any development to a provincially significant wetland. And where we see unevaluated wetland features, so ones that haven't been reviewed, that are kind of contiguous or directly adjacent to a PSW, we're normally going to want to see an environmental impact study to make sure that it's, either not part of that wetland feature or that it doesn't have some sort of like hydrologic connection to that you would be negatively impacting that feature. So again, the county wetland mapping did screen for unevaluated wetland. There's also a stratum 2 deer wintering yard. Stratum 2 is not core habitat for deer, but nevertheless, if you're doing an environmental study, you should consider it at the time if you're doing one anyway. And so the EIS was completed. As mentioned, this was done by Cambium and was peer reviewed. The report, the peer review, and the response to the peer review are appended to this report. So most importantly, the EIS delineated the wetland and recommends a 30-meter setback for development or site alteration. That's a pretty standard requirement. They did note that sort of in I believe it was the northwest corner of this property, the wetland feature there did appear to be a bit contiguous with the right provincially significant wetland. However, it was noted there was a heavily forested area and a ridge of land that sort of separated it from the potential development envelope along Lachlan Road where the retained land development area would be. So there was no concerns in terms of impacts directly on that wetland from the development proposal. The EIS also made other recommendations, which are very much sort of standard issue. We're looking at making sure that we're only clearing trees kind of in the immediate area of the development envelopes. We have timing windows for migratory bird nesting or bat roosting, sort of how we're storing materials on site in terms of turtle habitat, that kind of thing. They are all pretty standard issue, and they are typically addressed through a severance agreement, which has been included as a recommended condition of approval where the land division committee in a position to provide an approval for this application. Really quickly, we'll go over the compatibility with farm uses. So there's 3 livestock barns in proximity to the subject lands. The Minden Hills official plan and the county official plan require that you do, it's called the MDS1 setback calculation. And this is done where you have existing livestock barns that you're then looking to sort of create a sensitive or potentially incompatible land use like a house where you're wanting to set them back from it. A fulsome MDS was undertaken. I believe it's attached as one of the appendices to the planning justification report. The only barn that was found to have any sort of impacts on sort of development envelopes was the barn on Warder Road. I have 3 screens, so I have to move my mouse all the way across, but it's basically the one sort of at the very bottom of the sketch. And that setback again goes into that area that is currently encumbered with a wetland, so it wouldn't have been subject to development anyway. So the MDS basically showed that there were no concerns from the OMAFRA perspective in terms of existing barns and putting up a residential dwelling here. Now we'll talk about aggregate. So I will go into quite a bit of depth on the aggregate. I have some concerns about this application with regard to aggregate resources and sort of existing and potential aggregate uses on the adjacent properties. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a brief overview of where stuff is, and then I'm going to talk about the policy considerations and the recommendation coming from staff. So the subject property is located within 1 kilometer of 2 licensed aggregate operations. The county's official plan basically requires that you take a sort of a 1 kilometer buffer around aggregate or other class 3 industrial uses, and that's considered the influence area. So that's the area that we would have to look at if you're looking to put a sensitive land use, something like a residential use on those properties. You're going to want to do studies to ensure that there's no undue negative impacts within 1 kilometer of those operations. So there are 2 Class A operations in that vicinity. So the first, which is sort of immediately to the south, we're going to call it the Walker Pit and Quarry. This is operated by Fowler Construction. It's the closest. So at the closest point, it's 20 meters from the subject property. That's because it's on the other side of the road allowance. From the development envelopes, we're somewhere in the realm of 110 to 150 meters from those development envelopes. We also have the Lachlan Pit and Quarry, which is directly to the north. It's about 480 meters from the southerly edge of that licensed boundary to the northerly edge of the client's property. The development exceeds 500 meters from the licensed area, but again, we have to consider it kind of for influence because it's within 1 kilometer. Finally, there is a third industrial land use. North Steel has a facility along Gallert Road. It's actually sort of cut out of the aggregate operation to the south. It's a steel fabrication company, and it would typically be considered a class 2 industrial use. So there's 3 classes, class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 3 are kind of the ones that may, by their design, have more incompatibility. Class 1 are going to be sort of the least offensive in terms of a sensitive use, and they have sort of correspondingly greater setbacks for either the influence as well as a minimum separation. So all of our planning decisions should be consistent with the Provincial Planning Statement 2024. So the PPS identifies mineral aggregate uses and mineral aggregate resources to be protected for the long term. And so where provincial information is available, deposits of aggregate resources shall be identified. So this is that aggregate deposit that's located almost 300 meters north of that property. That's a deposit. When we're specifically talking about operations, we shall be protecting them from development and activities that would preclude or hinder their expansion or continued use, or which would be incompatible for reasons of public health, public safety, or environmental impact. And so basically, the way this regulation is written, this sort of policy direction is written, is that it's the job of municipalities and other approval authorities to protect the aggregate operation from encroaching sensitive uses. So that's your houses, daycares, schools, that kind of thing. Not the other way around. We're, we want to balance those things, but the PPS acknowledges the importance of aggregates and the fact that they're a finite resource. We can't move the aggregate operation to a less appealing location if there's not aggregate there. So that's why it's sort of considered to be kind of highly protected in terms of our policies. The county's official plan echoes this policy. So mineral aggregate operations shall be protected from development and activities that would adversely affect their expansion or continued use, or would be incompatible in ways of public health, safety, or environmental impact. This is almost a line-by-line quotation. So active mineral aggregate extractive uses are considered Class 3 industrial uses under what we call the D series guidelines. These are the environmental guidelines provided by the Ministry of Environment. The potential influence area for Class 3 industries is 1,000 meters. So when we talk about wanting to see an impact, we look at a kilometer around these things. And the minimum separation distance is 300 meters. So the minimum distance that we want all of our sensitive land uses to be from an existing aggregate operation is 300 meters, or about 1,000 feet. Incompatible land uses and activities both on-site and adjacent to existing pits and quarries shall not be permitted. For the purposes of this policy, adjacent shall be defined as 300 meters from a pit operation and 500 meters from a quarry operation, measured from the outer boundary of the licensed area. So it's not necessarily the area that activity is currently taking place in. That setback applies to the entire licensed area, because barring sort of a setback you might have from like an extraction limit and then the licensed area, a pit that's doing something in one area right now may be doing something very different in 10 years once they've decided to move to a different phase of their plan. The Minden Hills official plan. So aggregate policies for the Minden Hills official plan are under section 3.6. The plan hasn't had a conformity exercise in a number of years, neither for the county official plan nor the more recent sort of versions of the provincial planning statement, what was the provincial policy statement. Many of these policies conflict with the PPS or the county plan, and sort of in that scenario, we have to look at the policies of the county plan and the PPS, whatever is the most consistent with the PPS and whatever conforms to the county plan. But a couple I will note, so the rural residential policies directs rural residential development to areas where there's already existing development, and there is already existing development in this area, and would be compatible, and should not be in sort of remote or undeveloped areas or in close proximity to a number of features. So among these features, we have existing or known mineral aggregate deposits, aggregate or other resource-related industry or activity, and areas of natural features, including heritage areas, wetlands, fish, or wildlife habitat. So those are kind of areas where we're not hoping to direct activity in terms of the Minden Hills official plan for lot creation. I'm going to mention part of section 3.6 because this is pertinent to the study that was completed. So a noise or compatibility study shall be required to assess the impact of a sensitive land use that is proposed within 500 meters of a quarry, 300 meters of a pit below water, or within 150 meters of a pit above the water table. Again, this is one of these scenarios where we're considering the lack of conformity to the county plan, because the county plan makes that influence area for considering the adjacent uses 1,000 meters or a kilometer. So the applicants did provide a land use compatibility assessment that was prepared by Cambium Incorporated. The assessment was peer reviewed. The peer reviewer advised that the technical work of the assessment was done to industry standard, but there should be a review of the operational plans if you're going to make recommendations on that basis. So a couple of things that were of concern to myself when I reviewed it is the plan refers to the Minden Hills official plan and the D series guidelines, not the county official plan. The county official plan is more conservative and more restrictive with regard to minimum distance separation and the influence area. Thankfully for the influence area of the study, they did use the D series guidelines, which is also 1,000 meters. So it's more considering kind of the county policies and how you would be satisfying those. Secondly, the licenses and operational plans for these pits were not reviewed. So the study was based on assumptions about the use of the licensed area and the existence of existing sensitive receptors. And, i.e. that's the houses that are kind of already within the 500 meters of this property. And just a little quote from the reports, in the recommendations. So facilities FO1 and FO2. FO1 is the Walker Pit to the south. FO2 is the Lachlan Pit and Quarry to the north. Will present potential noise impact on site. Neither site is currently active. However, will be expected during operations that either site would be required to comply with MPC 300 either via your environmental compliance approvals, your ECA through the Ministry of Environment, or the aggregate licensing requirements under the Aggregate Resources Act. The proposed development does not introduce points of reception that would be considered the most sensitive for either facility, given the points of reception that are closer to this facility. So the concern with that, so I did contact the Ministry of Natural Resources and pulled the pit plan so that I could see kind of if it was reasonable, kind of in terms of the operation. The proposed activity in the land use compatibility study was very much constrained to the sort of south part of this parcel. This is the operational plan that was prepared in 2012 for the site that was licensed in January of 2007. So the red boundary is the licensed boundary of this pit. So that's the whole area. Basically, the whole ownership of this lot is licensed. So that's, I think it was 73 hectares. There's an extractive area. There's a 30-meter setback around that, and that's highlighted in purple. The 30-meter setback also applies to a water course that's in there that they're going to use to build a wetland, because this pit and quarry is designed to be below the water table. So as they mine downwards on this property, they can withdraw material down, I think, almost 100 meters. And then that water will be dewatered into a wetland feature that is being manufactured on that one corner of the lot. And then at the end, when we're rehabilitating this pit, the whole thing will be flooded. So it'll be like a big pond. Some of the concerns specifically that we have is that this site was licensed in January of 2007. So this is a bit of an aside. This isn't a policy thing, but Haliburton County wasn't designated under the Aggregate Resources Act until 2007. Prior to that, there were not aggregate licenses under that act issued. There were just sort of existing land uses. Prior to designation in March of 2006, the Ministry of Natural Resources prepared a number of policy documents and information that went out to licensees. And that information basically advised them that if they could prove that they had a legal operation, either through kind of zoning or official plan, or through a continued legal non-conforming use on the property, and that they'd been using it in the last 2 years, they could apply for an aggregate license come January 2007 with a sketch, and they would be exempted from the requirements of the ARA that you would have to do environmental, hydrogeological, noise, and other studies. So the site plan came later because eventually everybody has to get a site plan in. But most of the aggregate operations, I think almost all of them in Haliburton County, because I can't think of one that's been approved since 2007, are going to be these grandfathered pits and quarries. So they were not necessarily designed with the existing sensitive receptors in mind. They're kind of considered to be existing, potentially compatible, potentially incompatible uses. So staff have some concerns about the use of sort of existing properties or residential properties being sort of the litmus test for whether or not new properties would cause any incompatibility, because this has been licensed since 2007. There's been very little activity on it, but they've maintained an active license, and the plan that's provided for this allows a lot of extraction over the whole of the parcel, which could create sort of an incompatibility that existing landowners in the area just haven't experienced yet. So, that's not to say that the operator wouldn't be taking, steps to make sure that they're maintaining vegetation, potentially having some berms. The conditions of the license require, you're not keeping your stockpiles within 90 meters of a residential use, those sorts of things. But ultimately, we can't just assume that all of the noise is going to happen in one location on this lot. So the staff have concerns that that the report may not be reflecting the sort of the operational realities of this parcel. So our recommendation on that behalf would be not to necessarily deny this application, but staff are recommending that the report be reviewed and revised to address the operational parameters of the property, as well as the county's official plan policy, and to come up with what an appropriate minimum setback distance would be for a residential use, to establish a new residential use. And if that is, if that is something other than the 300 meters that we outlined in our official plan, staff are recommending that they would do a site-specific official plan amendment to that property to permit that use. Finally, Minden Hills Council endorsed this application subject to some conditions back in 2024. I think that was in December. We haven't received any agency comments to date. Staff at Minden Hills did say they when we sent them the notice, that 3 lots was definitely preferable to the 4 that they'd originally reviewed. And sort of the recommendation is outlined there on the screen as well. So I'm just going to stop sharing so that I can see all your lovely faces. And I'm happy to answer questions if the committee has any.
Thank you, Kim. You've covered a lot of ground there and clearly have done a lot of work on this. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Member McKelvey.
So I went out and looked at these proposed lots on the weekend. I cannot find what you're referring to as the Walker Pit or quarry. Doesn't seem to be marked as such. The other one on Lachlan Road, well marked, a gate.
Yeah.
Fowlers have their sign up, et cetera, et cetera. I get your point where they're grandfathered with very little controls put on them back in the day, but like this other pit that you're referring to that's south of the property, the people that have lived there forever never say it's never been used in 50 years. So, and like I said, I can't even find the entrance to it. So I'm just questioning why so much is being put on that pit. I get it. It's licensed. It's there. They can do whatever they want with it within reason. But there's homes closer to them than these are going to be. So, we refer to these within the influence area, but there's other existing houses within that 500 meters of the pit. Impacts to those residents would need to be mitigated by the pit operator, as I understand it. So those houses are already closer than what's being proposed. So this proposed development, in my opinion, doesn't introduce more points of reception, which can be considered to be the most sensitive of either pit, given that there's already existing receptors or houses already there. So the other thing, like I mentioned, I went out and looked at it. The corner of Warder Road and Lachlan Road is 1.4 kilometers to the Fowler Lachlan pit, where their gate is. So I understand that you mean it's going to work south of that gate. But I just, we have a housing shortage and we need these properties. This is a really nice area of the township of Minden Hills in the Lachlan area. I hate to see us putting up all these roadblocks. I mean, this is a bit of a Minden Hills rant, but they applied for 4 lots, had to pay pre-consultation on 4 lots, and then it was determined that the county wouldn't allow 4. So we would go back to this whole, we need one official plan in the county of Haliburton, but we don't have that luxury today. So it just seems like they've been put through a very, very lengthy process. They've put through a very expensive process with all these studies, and then I'm sure they must have had to pay for the peer reviews. And I don't see anywhere in here that says that it should have a county official plan. Now, I'm not a planner, so I just am concerned that these could be 3 plus the retained good lots in a nice area for residential houses to bring people to this community and be able to work here.
So sorry, is there a question? Or is it just a
Nowhere-
comment?
Well, it's basically a comment, but I'm still questioning why the need for a county official plan. Can you just go over that again for me?
A plan amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, because the county official plan requires that incompatible land uses be 500 meters from a quarry. It's not 500 meters from a quarry. Therefore, if you can provide confirmation that you're not going to have a negative impact on those parcels, and again, I can appreciate your perspective. I can also, I'm sure, appreciate the property owner's perspective in terms of this whole thing. I make the recommendation on the basis that we're required to consider sort of the highest and best use of land. The land directly to the south of this property, the highest and best use of that land is aggregate. It's designated as aggregate, both under the Aggregate Resources Act, the county official plan, and the Minden Hills official plan. So we have to consider that if it were to be extracted to the full extent of the license that they have been provided by the Ministry of Natural Resources under the ARA, we have to be concerned about that sort of setback. The 500-meter setback is not, it's not a random number, sort of, it's not just a frivolous number. That number comes from the D-Series guidelines, and the D-Series guidelines are based on either A, previous technical studies that have shown that typically once you're outside of that 500 meters, you're less likely to have impacts, or that you receive fewer noise complaints or other complaints when your properties are outside of that 500 meters. So again, it's up to the county land division committee to sort of make their determination on that basis. But my sort of position, having reviewed all of this, is that, you know, the land is designated for that use. What we don't want to happen is that, you know, no pits are ever no large pit owners. So say Fowler's, they own this, they own numerous pits. They're never operating them all the time. They have business plans, they maintain licenses on these properties so that at a certain point in time, maybe they're going to be in a position where they're going to start extracting here. So we have to treat it that way. I can appreciate the committee may have other considerations that they want to take under advisement, but that's the recommendation, would be that the official plan amendment would recognize a site-specific setback that's determined by the appropriately scoped technical study. So that's the recommendation. The committee will note that I've also provided proposed conditions of consent approval were the committee to have their own perspective and choose to grant provision of consent.
Other questions? Member McKelvey?
Kim, and I appreciate that because you do have to take all these things into consideration. Can you tell me where that south pit is even accessed? Because like I said, the north pit, the Lachlan Road pit of Fowler's is very well marked, large sign, license number, blah, blah, blah. I can't find the other one.
Yeah, there's a field entrance that's fairly grown over. There is a small sign there. I did find it, and I was able to track it down on Google Street View when I took a look at it that way as well, because I went out to the site as well. So they have so under the Aggregate Resources Act, when you have your site plan approved, you do have to have like your approved haulage route, and their haulage route will be through an exit onto Gillert Road. So for the purposes of this, for example, we don't have to worry necessarily about traffic on Warder Road coming from the operation. It would just be sort of the noise, vibration, and dust that might be coming, given that you're, you know, a couple hundred meters potentially away from those houses. So they don't use this pit right now. It's just that it happens to be licensed and designated for a very full build out of what they could do with it. So yeah, that's where that comes from.
And if I may, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So I appreciate that you've given us the option where the committee can decide that we want to accept the applications and we want to impose all these various conditions. You haven't put the official plan amendment for the county in that. So if we were to take this plan B that you've provided us, which I truly appreciate, what happens here? Is there all of a sudden an official plan amendment needed because they need a rezoning?
Again, I can't speak to that sort of, what I can say is I cannot make an official plan amendment a condition of a consent because consents must conform to the official plan. So if in the wisdom of the committee determines that my interpretation of the official plan is different from yours, and yours is that, they've addressed the incompatibility, we consider that to be consistent and in conformity, I can't put a condition in there to the effect because it's essentially fatal to the application if it didn't get approved. So, certainly, I don't know that it offends the Minden Hills official plan. Certainly, if Minden Hills were to bring forward a zoning bylaw amendment for an application for this purpose, I would provide comments because I am the commenting agency saying that, again, the Land Division Committee did grant consent on this. County staff continue to have concerns, and Minden Hills Council will need to use their wisdom to make a decision on the zoning bylaw amendment to the best of their ability. So I can't condition an OPA. The OPA either is required and comes first or isn't required at all because you, as the approval authority, have determined it's not required.
Any other questions? Member Donald?
Kim, there appears on your first sketch about 12 properties that are divided very close to the corner of those two roads. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a number of sort of historical. So none of those were created by severance since I think it's the 2014 PPS came into effect that sort of put those restrictions on that sort of buffer around those properties.
Okay.
So that's what you run into when you grandfather pits like we have in Haliburton County is there's going to be lots, when we do official plan policies or things like that, it would be lovely if we started with a blank piece of land that we could then draw all of our appropriate locations on and make sure everything is, tickety-boo.
Right.
In this scenario, the ARA says that, if they have a license for it, they're allowed to operate it within the bounds of that license.
I
And
understand
yeah,
that.
so those lots weren't created,
But they're there.
in opposition to that or anything like that. So most of those, I believe, were created, most of them probably prior to subdivision control even. So you used to
1961.
simply, you just used to be able to, have your lawyer draw a rectangle on a map and say, we're registering that one.
Right.
So yeah,
Now,
most of those lots are older.
Yeah, the other thing you said that the owners had to go and get a land use compatibility study, and that was peer reviewed. And the peer review thought it was done properly to industry standards. You mentioned there was something else you thought should happen.
So the peer reviewer determined that sort of the work in terms of the calculations were done to industry standards.
Right.
Part of the reason why we send this to a peer reviewer is because I am by no means qualified to tell you how to measure stationary noise from
Understood.
Those sort of things. So they did note in the peer review that it would be beneficial to review the operational plans again, because you need to know sort of where those noises are coming from and what the limits are of those noises as per the operational plan and the license before you can make sort of a truly educated sort of determination. So it would just be a matter, I think, of revising those calculations based upon the parameters of that plan.
Okay. And if Tammy wanted to move an amendment to approve these 3 lots, how would that work technically?
So I mean, if the committee is supportive of creating these lots, subject to the conditions that are outlined in the report, it would simply be a matter of somebody would make a motion, somebody would second that motion, the committee would do a vote, and if the vote carries, they would be approved. So that's entirely, and again, planners, we make recommendations based upon all of these various moving parts. You are the approval authority. You are making the choices.
Yeah. Tammy, if you wanted to make that amendment, I would second it.
We-
Sorry, Kim?
I was just going to say we do have the applicant's planner in
we should hear them.
attendance. He's going to provide a presentation, which I'm sure will probably echo what you two are talking about.
Okay.
And we do have, I believe, a neighboring landowner and the property owner in the meeting. So I think it would be fair through you to the chair to give all of those folks an opportunity
Yeah.
to speak, to answer questions, and then certainly any member of the committee would be in a position to move whatever they'd like.
I didn't mean to cut off the owner or the planners.
It's okay.
Kim, before we move on, I do have one question.
Sure.
I'm a bit concerned about notice to the purchasers. How would a potential purchaser of this property know that they are within the setback for a pit operation?
So through not through you, to you, Mr. Deputy Chair. Typically there would normally be, we did discuss this with a previous consent we did a couple months ago for Miller Lake, where that land use compatibility report had actually had some recommendations in terms of sort of things that needed to be registered on title. We cannot register just a notice on title that you will happen to be close to an industrial land use. That's not considered a title matter by the Land Registry Office. However, typically, if you have a severance agreement that is to be registered, you will register that on title. And usually in the conditions, and I believe I put them in here too, we would be looking at the county would be provided an opportunity to review that severance agreement and comment on it prior to it being taken to Minden Hills Council for endorsement. The county planning staff would recommend somewhere, more or less on page 1, stating that, this is in the area of, X setback to an existing licensed aggregate operation. Property owners should be advised that there may be noise, dust, vibration, etc.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions, I believe the applicant's agent is here, Derek Polkar, if I've got that pronunciation right.
He is.
Hello. I was just added as a panelist. I thought I got lost and kicked out of the call there for a minute. Apologies. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Wonderful. My name is Derek Pecora. I'm a land use planner working with EcoView Planning Consultants, acting as the agent on behalf of Roger and Kelly Hicks. Kelly is the landowner. They're a married couple. Kelly owns the lands, the subject lands to the south, and Roger owns the lands to the north. Thank you so much for your time. Kim, you've done a fantastic job, I think, at reviewing all the details. And when I emailed Kim, I said I would make it a brief presentation. And then by the time I was done, it was over 30 slides. And I think Kim has covered a lot of the details. So I will try to advance much as forward as I can into speaking to the relevant details of which is the crux of this conversation. So thanks everyone for your time. Do I have the ability to share my screen, Kim, so I can present?
I believe that you're now a panelist, Derek, so you would just have to share your screen. So I think I don't believe there's any restriction there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think I should be good. Is everyone able to see my screen?
We are.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the delay there. So to go back to the crux of the argument, I think as what Kim has brought up is, I think, kind of speaks to some of the incompatibilities in terms of the policies between Minden Hills and Haliburton County. But I wanted to speak to specifically the policies that were brought up initially. And
We've lost you there, Derek.
oh, can you hear me?
Yes, can
No.
now.
Okay. It gave me a warning my connection was unstable. So I wanted to speak to the policy specifically that Kim and I have been referencing. And in terms of the interpretation of the policies that were set forth. So when we first engaged in a pre-consultation, policy 6315 was addressed by the senior planner at the county. after we had gone through the staff report and the review with Minden Hills, and that was that 6315 states that incompatible land uses and activities both on the site and adjacent to an extractive reserve shall not be permitted. For the purposes of the policy, the adjacent is defined as 300 from a sand and a gravel resource and 500 meters from a bedrock resource, so pit versus quarry, measured from the outer boundary of the deposit. Now, this policy specifically differs in terms of its understanding to the policy that was brought up later with 6324 that states that incompatible land uses on site and adjacent are measured from the outer boundary of the licensed area. So this is one thing I just wanted to flag in terms of analyzing where we're actually looking at that source of potential incompatibility is arising from. So within the slide I'm showing here, there is the difference in terms of boundary of the deposit versus boundary of the licensed area, and then incompatible uses specifically is being defined as sensitive to include sensitive land uses, which are defined as buildings, amenity areas, or outdoor spaces where routine and normal activities occurring at reasonably expected times would experience adverse effects. So our understanding then is that 6324 does not necessarily state that any land use is automatically incompatible if within the distance. It has to be determined to be incompatible, which I understand, and this is some degree of inference from a party who's not present, which is Kim's predecessor, as to why that land use compatibility assessment was required in the first place. And through the land use compatibility assessment, it was found through the consultant that the proposed land uses were in fact deemed to be compatible for a number of reasons, but the primary one that I'm understanding at least is that there are already existing intervening sensitive land uses that are closer to the point source. So as we've seen this diagram, I've marked it up a little bit here. This was the land use operations plan that was provided that Kim obtained from the Ministry of Natural Resources. And as we see, there are 14 lots that are either directly adjacent to or across the street from and within a much closer proximity. So the onus would be on any expanded use of the aggregate use to ensure that there wouldn't be any land use compatibility issues pertaining to air quality, vibration, noise, dust. And then as well, we also found that the proposed severances, to speak to the lot to the north, the 3 proposed severances are outside of the 300 and 500 meter range of the F02 pit to the north. So with that understanding, we see it not that, anything within 300 or 500 meters from the pit is therefore automatically deemed to be incompatible. It has to be understood to be incompatible, which the land use compatibility study stated otherwise. So therefore, it doesn't state that all consents are incompatible uses, nor does that policy 6324 state that residential use is automatically compatible and incompatible use. That was the crux of which I wanted to speak to the issue. If we're looking at the edge of the deposit, and I recognize that there is a distinction in terms of what Kim was saying of, the pit has not been used for, I believe it was member McKelvey who had stated that, there are members of the community who have stated this pit hasn't been active in 50 years. I can't speak to the actual timelines in terms of their license, given that their license was still active. Well, it's still active as of today, but was obtained back in, the aughts. Kim, I believe you said it was 2007, if I'm correct. Okay, thank you. So that timeline is difficult to ascertain, and we do recognize that, things are fine at present, but the future use is what needs to be considered given the active license. However, if there is expansion and use, again, we do understand, and it was illustrated in the land use compatibility plan, that the onus would be on the aggregate resource to ensure that they are not impeding on the existing surrounding residential sensitive use. If we look at the source of the deposit, and I use the X here on this slide to show where it shows that there is an actual pit, and I estimated the distance. If we look at that in terms of the definition, and it is at present well over 500 meters away from where the proposed severances are, which is approximately 800 and some odd meters north of the applicable land. which I think is also reflected, as we can see here, within the local zoning designations. So as I've stated, land uses and activities determined to be incompatible are not permitted within 500 meters of the quarry. However, the land use compatibility assessment did determine them to be compatible. And I think I mentioned this in an email specifically to Kim, just to address that section 6.3 within the interpretation within the planning justification report did address that was inclusive of 6324 of the CHOP. So we understand that the proposal is infill development. It is close to the existing community, but it can be considered to be rounding out of the development. The issues can be addressed within a zoning bylaw amendment. I think one thing that it's not necessarily the most relevant thing to this meeting, but just in the future to address that site-specific zoning might be required for these 3 severed lands as a result of existing open space requirements within the rural residential zone. So we might need to address those just given the constraints, given the number of wetlands that are on the retained and severed lands, and their corresponding 30-meter setbacks provides smaller lots, which are somewhat more constrained. And as a result, we might have to adjust in terms of setbacks to permit for development within those areas, which can be attained even within the lot 3, which is the most constructed. There still appears to be enough land to support a 15-meter distance from a standard class 4 system, septic system, as well as a developable envelope for an existing single detached dwelling at the minimum size, with some room to spare, some configuration issues aside that, you could play with a little bit. There is enough room that can be accommodated within all 3. So just to reflect that there should be probably some potential details that need to be kind of ironed out in terms of the zoning for site-specific zoning amendment. And so we find that it does conform to the applicable policies, including Section 338 and Section 6.3 of the CHOP and the Minden Hills official plan. We recognize that a zoning bylaw amendment would be required to permit these residential units. It represents good planning and is in the public interest, and that it should be approved.
Thank you, Derek. Before we see if there's any questions, is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the application? Kim.
So I do believe we have 2 folks to speak to it. So, pardon me. Oh, I got a frog in my throat. Kelly Hicks, I believe, is in attendance. And then Mr. Les Firo is also in attendance. Mr. Firo is an adjacent landowner. So perhaps we could let them in one at a time to speak anything they wanted to say.
Derek, maybe you could stop the sharing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hicks, can you hear us? You're on mute. Kelly, you're on mute. We're not hearing you. There
You should hear me now.
Yes.
And I'll give you some video too if you want to see my face. How's that?
Here they are.
There you are. Good. Thank
Hello,
you.
folks. So you have Kelly Hicks and Roger Hicks. Just a little bit about a background about ourselves. We are owners of 2 47-acre parcels of land. Roger owns the north 47 acres, and Kelly owns the south 47 acres where we're doing this proposed severance applications on. And just a little bit of my understanding, I started this project back in 2022 with talking with a planning technician by the name of Alex McMaster, and then joined on in 2023 Adam Kozlowski, who's the senior planner for the county. And in discussion with these two gentlemen, we were proposing some lot severance, and it came to the conclusion to bring in a land use planner. That's how Derek through EchoView came to light. And then we submitted applications, as has been indicated, in April of 24 to Minden Hills for 4. And we saw that the county would not recognize probably 4 severances, but 3 with 1 remaining. So we said, okay, that's fine. Our whole intent is to develop Lachlan. As a person who lived in Lachlan for the last 60, well, I'm 64 years old. I'm going to be 65. I don't want to give you all my beauty here away, but we we've been in the neighborhood for over 60 plus years, and yes, I can speak on behalf of the active pits, which are in the big question. The pit to the south, which you referred as the Walker pit, there has been no activity, and I mean by extraction, for the last 50 years. And I can confirm that with neighbors in Lachlan. I can sign a petition or whatever you need for information on that if you need that. And to the north, there has been no activity in that pit, which is for the last 25 years. And I can get information from there if you need that. I would be more than happy to do that. Now, looking at these two things, we were going to try and do severance on the north, and we left that, and we now pursued the south because it was the most feasible to do, and also we first wanted to remain rural lots, but that we came into rural residential, and we thought, hey, this is going to be an easy process, and with a little bit of experience, we got involved with the county, and the counties would requested that we do land use compatibility studies and environmental impact studies, which we started that in April of 2025 or sooner than that. And then they writ their consensus that we have lots that are compatible to putting residential homes on them down the road. We also got into getting a septic haulage permit in place too, to look at that they would accept and look after the septic use of those lots. Now, when I look at this question about the pits, the first thing that came to mind, I was first told that the lot setback was 300 meters, then it became 500 meters, and now we're looking at another thing, 1,000 meters. These goalposts are just moving on us, but I would like to reflect that I do own the north part of this parcel of land, and there's 1,575 feet of road frontage, which takes me 870 meters away from just the outer boundary of the lot. And then when you look at where our severance packages are going to be laid, lots we're going to be creating, there's another 400 or 500 meters on top of that. So that gives me well over a kilometer distance away from the Fowler pit to the north. So I'm really wondering, why is that pit even an issue with what we're trying to bring forth? But we've done our due diligence, and we've done land use compatibility studies on those. And in the south pit, when we look at that pit has not been in operation for over 50 years, as I indicated. And its extraction point is down by Galert Road. But I understand what Kim is saying, that they put the footprint of the extraction pit 30 meters away from houses that are alongside of Warder Road, which, again, those houses are all in between my severance lots that we're going to be looking at. So am I to understand that I have to wait to see if Fowler is going to flood this land or they're going to do any extraction or whatever before I can have any consideration for severance, when there are lots already in place, residential lots with homes that people are living in right now? I'm not trying to say anything wrong here, but please understand, I think we have the cart before the horse, where we're already into the development stage and you have an operating pit that is not really operating, but it's licensed, but we're holding back the potential development of homes in Laughlin, which at one time was just a farmer's area. Now it is all it's just a community where we're building homes. In the last 60 years, I've seen 14 or 15 new houses being built in this area, and along Laughlin Road right now, there's just one that's recently been built, and there's another lot that's being cleared, getting another house to build, and our hydro lines are moving up the road. So is this what we want to do? We want to hold back development of property. I totally respect Minden Hills and Haliburton County's policies, and again with the provincial's policies, because we took the steps to have everything done so that our due diligence was done properly, so that we can make our decision to move on. People, thank you for listening to me. I know it's been a long process for me. I don't want to sound like I'm a little bit flustered a bit here, but I've been 4 years in this development, and I just want some clear direction what we can do and what we can do to make this project go forward. Kelly and I are both happy to hear from this, as long as it's legitimate and it's concerning that where we can make the best impact for the town of Laughlin. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Mr. Hicks. Kim, you mentioned there was another speaker?
Yeah, Mr. Lesfiro, I believe he's a neighboring landowner across the road. He has joined the meeting as well. I'm not sure if he has any comments, but we should give him an opportunity to speak. Yeah, Les has raised his hand there, so Kathy can track him down.
Mr. Firo, can you hear us? You're muted now. Mr. Firo, maybe you could.
Yeah.
There you are.
How's
Yes,
that?
we can hear you now.
Sorry about that. Pat knows me. He knows I'm not a good computer guy. Yeah, I just wanted to put my 2 cents in. I mean, we've been in the neighborhood for a while, and we know the Hicks. And I'm actually in this meeting to learn a lot more about my community, because I've only been here about 18 years. And I don't, as a resident that's going to live right across from these 3 lots, I don't see any issues on my side of the coin. And, I hope that they can work something out with the council, as long as the lands are used for what they're supposed to be used for. I have some, reservations about, there's a lot of trailers up in our area as well. And I've talked to Lisa about it a little bit. But as far as the 3 lots go, they're not, I don't think they're hurting anybody. I had no idea that that quarry was behind my house, as a matter of fact. So I've learned quite a bit today just attending this meeting. But for my 2 cents, I think Tammy's right. I mean, if we can, help these people and have an amendment of some kind to let them create 3 lots, that we'd welcome new development in our area for sure.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment.
Thanks for listening.
To the committee members, are there any questions that you wanted to send back to Derek or Kim at this point? Yes, Member Kennedy.
Thank you. And I really sympathize with the Hicks family. This is unreal, the amount of red tape you've been put through. And the province is saying that they're going to reduce red tape. I can't even imagine the cost. I think you've hired every consultant in Ontario here to do this, and you're still getting stymied. I need a couple of answers on the more to staff, or the aggregate boundary you speak of. Is that the lot, like the property that the Fowlers would own, or is that the deposit area?
So just through you to the chair, I can answer that question, but I see Mr. Pecora has his hand up. It would be fair to bring him back in as a panelist, just in case there is a little bit of back and forth. I don't think we'll be in disagreement, but I don't want to miss his opportunity, if that's okay for with you,
Yes.
Deputy Chair Snyder. Great. Kathy, could you kindly promote Derek again?
Are we able to find Derek?
Just waiting a second. Sorry, the joys of virtual meetings.
There's just some technical difficulties. One moment, they're figuring it out.
Thank you.
It wouldn't be a land division committee meeting without a couple of technical difficulties. I can just start answering just from a basic policy perspective. No opinion needed. To Member Kennedy, what we're talking about specifically when we talk about the license boundary. So there's 2 different sets of policies. So one is for aggregate resources, which are deposits. And so the deposits are, they're from the Ontario Geological Survey, and basically they outline across Ontario where you have substantial deposits of bedrock, gravel, sand, the type and quality of those deposits. They're, they're primary, secondary, or tertiary. So primary and secondary deposits are sort of the best deposits. And when we talk about sort of aggregate resources deposits, there doesn't have to be any sort of licensed anything going on for that to be protected by the provincial policy. So basically what they're saying is that in those scenarios, you're going to require that a proponent who's going to do like a sensitive land use, like a house, that they would address sort of the feasibility of that deposit to be used. So say you've got a piece of land in Haliburton that has a secondary aggregate deposit on it, but it's smack dab in the middle of town that already has a bunch of existing sensitive uses, houses, a public school, that kind of thing. A planner would be in a position to write a report that say that sort of from a health and safety, a feasibility, and sort of a good sensible use of land perspective, that deposit isn't really accessible. So when we get out into rural areas, like out in Lachlan, where we have primary deposits, so there is a primary deposit that I believe is on the Hicks's northern lot. And I believe it's a primary, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Derek, I believe it's a primary gravel resource, I think. It might be gravel, I'm not sure if it's sand or gravel, it's not bedrock. And so basically we have policies that are designed to sort of protect those. So they don't have to have a licensed operation on them. It's just making sure that, you know, you don't want to create a new residential use right next door, for example, with a new lot or a new subdivision. If that would be like the only thing that would impact the ability for somebody to get a pit license, there would be creating those sensitive uses. When we talk about sort of the boundaries of licensed pit operations. Yeah, thank you, Derek. So see this pink line that's on Derek's sketch? So that's a 300-meter setback from the aggregate deposit, which is actually outlined in pink on his sketch. So what he's showing is that nothing they're going to do on here on this property is going to impact that deposit to the north. So in terms of, and again, sort of that satisfies the policy requirement. My concern, and this is where he and I have a difference of opinion, is the county policy requires that we have a 300-meter distance separation for a pit or a 500-meter distance separation for a quarry. And these are licensed uses. So that's the purple area that's shown on his sketch, sort of underneath the schedule. That is the licensed boundary of the Walker pit and quarry. So I understand in the original pre-consultation, I don't know that sort of that pit or quarry was taken into consideration. Sort of, I don't know kind of whether it was on the consultant's end or on the township's end. I'm not here to discuss that. That's whether or not it's there or not now. So that's the licensed boundary. And the way our policy is written essentially is that we don't permit incompatible uses. And that's going to be your sensitive land uses. So the D3's guidelines say specifically those are residential types of uses, and residential uses are incompatible 24/7, for example. We don't permit those incompatible uses within 300 meters of the licensed boundary. So that's the edge of the boundary. In this case, the edge of the boundary for the license is the same as the property boundary. They license the whole property here. There could be scenarios where the property owner owns, 800 acres or something like that, and only a portion of it is licensed. We wouldn't measure from the property boundary in that case. We would be measuring from the licensed boundary. In this scenario, those two things are the same. So, so for our policy, it's 300 meters if it's a pit, 500 meters if it's a quarry. And then when we talk about the 1,000 meters, that's just the area of influence that if you're going to be doing some sort of study, so say you're doing noise or vibration or things like that, you've got to look for everything kind of within a kilometer. That's what the influence area is meant to determine. So Derek and I have a difference of opinion. I'm of the opinion that, because this is a class 3 facility or sort of the most sort of heavy duty industrial use, a residential use is always incompatible sort of by definition. Derek's position is that because they've done a compatibility study that didn't find sort of any gross incompatibility here, it's considered a compatible use, therefore it's allowed within the 300 meters. And it's entirely, the prerogative of the Land Division Committee to make a determination as to how they'd like to go with it. I hope that answers the question. It was a bit long-winded.
Pat, any other questions?
Yeah. You have to remind me, Kim, of the difference between the grandfathering of this pit in 2007 and what the differences may be with setbacks and that kind of thing currently.
Sure. So basically what we see now is if you were to apply for, so I'm going to throw my hands up here and say, I am not a planner that helps people license aggregate operations. So I am not an expert in the Aggregate Resources Act. I'm only going to provide to you what I know as somebody that does research and works sort of within the space. So when you're going to license a new pit operation, so say, you've got a blank piece of land that you want to put a gravel pit or a quarry on. There's a couple of things you need to do. So first, before you make an application to the Ministry of Natural Resources, you do have to sort of confirm with the local municipality and or county, whoever the approval authorities are, that the land use designation for that property permits you to have a gravel pit or an aggregate use. So in most of the local municipalities, including Minden Hills, establishing a new aggregate operation requires an official plan amendment. And typically would require some zoning. So for example, if you had a big piece of rural land today and you wanted to zone it, you wanted to put a pit on it, you would need to have it designated as like an MX, an extractive use. And typically the official plan amendment would then add it to the schedule there as well. As part of that official plan amendment, The approval authority being, you know, a combination of the local municipality and the county in most cases, they're going to require a number of studies. So, and most of those studies are also required for your aggregate impact license, or your aggregate extractive license, pardon me. So typically we're going to be looking at land use compatibility. So if I put this here, who am I impacting? Are there people nearby that would be impacted by what I'm doing? We're going to do noise studies. We're going to be looking at air quality like dust, that sort of thing. We're going to look at hydrogeology. So if I create a quarry that's, you know, 150 meters below ground, am I going to drain everybody's wells in their surrounding area? We're going to do an environmental impact study or an environmental assessment to basically, so today, typically wetland features are not included in the licensed area. That wasn't the case sort of a number of years ago. And so you're going to do all of that stuff that kind of proves that your pit can be there. You're going to get the land use approval in place. So you're going to have sort of that perspective pinned down from the municipality. You'll then make an application to the Ministry of Natural Resources. They will review it. You'll have a surveyor and or landscape architect and or professional planner all work together to put together the site plan for the pit. So that operational plan that typically includes a couple different sections. There's an existing conditions. That's what Derek had up on the original one. There's the operational plan, which is what I had marked up there for you. And then there's actually one that's designed to show you what the rehabilitation looks like on that site. So what does it look like when it's done? What are the slopes that are permitted? Those sorts of things. That then gets reviewed by the Ministry of Natural Resources. This is where I get a little bit hazy, but basically that gets reviewed. If it looks like it's okay, I believe it goes on the environmental registry for 30 days for comments. And then the minister can the Ministry of Natural Resources can approve the pit, or they can refer it to, if there's a matter of sort of issues with it, they can refer it to the Ontario Land Tribunal to have the tribunal make a decision on whether or not the pit is permitted. So that's kind of the long and short of it. There's a lot of legislative loopholes or sort of hoops to jump through. In terms of what they did when they first designated in 2007, and again, I wasn't working in this sector. I was in university in 2007. But what I can say is, in my sort of previous work where I've assisted with some of the planning approvals for pit amendments or preparing pit plans, you know, for a surveyor, what they did back in 2007 essentially was that you had to provide some sort of confirmation to the Ministry of Natural Resources. The policy said that you either had to establish that you had a zoning in place or that you had a legal non-conforming use. You made an application with a sketch, not your full-blown site plan, to the minister. If you got that in within the first 6 months from designation, which was January 1st, 2007 to, you know, the end of June, start of June. I don't know what 6 months are anymore. Basically you were in that sort of, you were exempted from the requirement that you do all of those studies. So the noise, the hydrogeology, the dust, the air. It also did not necessarily require that you got the planning approvals. Though again, if you were already zoned as like an MX zone, no big deal, you know, that kind of thing. I believe that the municipalities were provided with a certain period of time where they were able to comment if they had any opposition to them, and then the licenses were issued, and then they followed up later to get your sort of full-blown site plan, because you do have to have an operational plan that basically says, you know, this is how we're going to mine it. This is how we're going to rehabilitate it. Here's the setbacks we're going to have on it, that kind of thing. So this pit, I did get a copy of the license and the operational plan. This pit license was issued, I believe, January 1st, 2007. So these folks submitted a sketch and they got a license as of that date. They then followed that up a couple years later with the sort of the full-blown site plan. That is the site plan that's on file with the Ministry of Natural Resources today. And that is the one that I contacted the Minden office and asked them if they could kindly kick me a copy of it. And then I provided a copy of it to Derek. I didn't request the pit to the north, simply just because sort of for the purpose of the conversation we're having right now, I can acknowledge that pit is 500 meters from where these dwellings are going to be going. It's still technically in that influence area. So if they're going to revise their study, I would like them to look at that plan to make sure there's no incompatibilities or anything there. But in terms of what I was concerned about, which was the official plan policy about that 500 meters, I wanted to see what the operations look like for this pit. So Yeah, and that would be why, for example, Derek shared the zoning. The zoning for that whole parcel doesn't show extractive, but the official plan policy for both the county and the township of Minden Hills show the whole property as being extractive. And that's because that information comes from a layer from the Ministry of Natural Resources. There's a find a pit and quarry layer that Land Information Ontario provides that shows all of that. So yeah, that's my long-winded way of saying it wasn't nearly as hard to get a license in 2007 as it is today. And that's where my concern is, that we have these uses that sort of maybe weren't necessarily taken into consideration the way one would hope at the time that these were issued. We can't rely on that necessarily. So that's why I'd like to see it revised. And I believe Liz has a comment.
Elizabeth? Please go
Yes.
ahead.
So, thank you, Deputy Chair. Just if I may, just to add to Kim's very detailed explanation, the unique part of the 2007 licensing efforts by the province was that, as she said, nothing was really required of the landowners to obtain these licenses. Moving forward, these licensed pits through that effort, the only thing they really have to adhere to is their operational plan that was submitted and the noise bylaw of the municipality. It wouldn't be their onus to ensure that incompatible activities were mitigated from the surrounding properties. That would have been included in the modern process to look at incompatible land uses and how they interact with a proposed pit. But in this situation, it would be the property owner of the pit, if they ever chose to extract, would not have a requirement to do so.
Thank you. Member McKelvey.
As a former municipal employee, I could tell you in 2007, when the Aggregate Resources Act came into place here in Haliburton County, everybody was scrambling to get their pits grandfathered. And don't get me wrong, we really need aggregate pits to help build our roads and our driveways and all of that good stuff. However, they weren't put through any process. Some of these site plans came in on the back of a cigarette pack practically. So somebody going to get a pit now, they would have to be a millionaire almost to be able to do it. My feeling is, though, that I'm wondering, I realize they got the whole area, the whole lot. I'm just wondering, on that lot, especially the one to the south, do we have anything that shows where the primary deposit area is within that property? Is it all out on Glurt Road? Is it in the middle of the property? Is it the whole property? I don't think it is the whole property, that's for sure.
I believe the primary deposit is on the land actually to the north. It's not on the pit to the south. There is some aggregate, there is some area of aggregate reserve, and it is closer to the road, but I don't believe that the actual reserve itself, I don't believe it's a primary reserve. So I can double check that, but yeah, there is a sand and gravel resource sort of down closer to the road.
Which road, Kim?
Sorry, pardon me, Glurt Road, sort of
okay, thank you.
on the to the south. The only aside I would make is that the mapping we have is kind of based upon an older geological survey. Lots of people operate productive pits and quarries in areas that are not necessarily designated as primary, secondary, or tertiary like reserves on that survey. So the thing is that the geological survey is an imprecise tool. You have to basically go and do sort of samples on the site to see that where the kind of the good stuff is, more or less, that you would extract.
I just wonder what, based on what we do have, then the good stuff, as you put it, is probably closer to the south end on the Glurt End Road.
As far as I'm aware, so there is some mapped aggregate there. As far as I'm aware, because they don't put that on the site plan, the operational plan. I'm not sure if Fowler's has been out to site and done some sampling to determine where where they may want to operate. Typically, that's why these sort of aggregate areas tend to be pretty broad in terms of what people request for licensing, because yeah, what shows up on sort of as an aggregate reserve, maybe 200 or 300 meters one way or the other when we're looking at like something as small scale as lot boundaries.
Right.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer to that.
I'd like to get a sense from the committee on how they'd like to proceed. Whether there's a sense for deferral, or we want to approve the 3 lots today. Member McKelvey.
While I really appreciate the amount of work that Kim has put into this, and this is no reflection on her. I want to support the 3 severances. So I would like to bypass the need for a deferral and another official plan amendment and that sort of thing. So I would put that resolution.
Okay, Member Donald.
I'm with Kim on this one. I would support approval of these 3 lots.
Member Kennedy.
Yes, I support the 3 lots.
Kim, there seems to be a sense that they'd like to bring forward a resolution to approve the lots. Do you have such a resolution prepared?
I had a sneaking suspicion that conversation may happen. So I did hand bomb something here. So let me read my own terrible handwriting, and then we'll see if their members want to move it. So that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton received the report related to applications for consent H04125, H04225, and H04325, and that the Land Division Committee grant provisional approval of applications H04125, H04225, and H04325, subject to the conditions of approval outlined in the staff report. I guess the question is, do we have a mover and a seconder to that effect?
Do we have a mover and a seconder? Member McKelvey move. Member Donald second.
Right.
Okay, so we do a recorded vote for these. So despite the fact that it's a bit superfluous because she did move it, but Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Kennedy.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you, everyone, for their work on this. Yes, Member Kennedy.
Thank you. Just trying to, the Hicks have had to hire, as I say, every consultant in Canada to get this through. What's the final recommendation? Do you base them on what Cambion says, or take a couple of examples, the noise and that bylaw or that recommendation. Cambion says it's not necessary, and yet you've got it in here that we need a noise and traffic, and the something to do with the bats here. Cambion disagrees on that. And then also the retained lands should conform to Cambion disagrees. So do you take Cambion's statement, or do you take the one that opposes it?
Oh, so through the chair to the member. So you're talking about the peer review conversation. Yes. So what happens basically when we do a peer review is the peer reviewer is going to review it with kind of a fine-tooth comb, and they're going to say, here's some things that we think could potentially, be changed, be improved, that sort of thing. We then get a response from the applicant's consultants, and sometimes they agree with those things. They say, oh yeah, we missed that, we'll throw that in there. Or they say, no, we disagree. With regard to the EIS, I was of the opinion that the EIS that was done was very technically sound, and the recommendations were good. The recommendations that they have in that report are your very straightforward recommendations. Cambium did note in some of the responses in the environmental that they could be sort of conditions of consent and things like that. Typically, when we're talking about sort of the bats and the birds and stuff like that, what happens is in the severance agreement, we simply include language saying that the trees can't be removed within a certain time of year, which are your sort of nesting periods or your roosting periods. That's very, very common. I don't think I've seen an EIS that's gone through the committee, but any committee I've been sort of providing advice to that didn't include that type of language. It's very boilerplate, and I think Derek would probably agree. But in my opinion, there's a conversation about sort of drainage courses and vernal ponds and those sorts of things. But I felt comfortable that the 30-meter no development, you're retaining your vegetation, all of that kind of stuff, that was going to protect that stuff adequately and still provide them with a building envelope. So yeah, so in that case, we agreed with Cambium. In the scenario of the land use compatibility study, so staff in the proposed recommendations is we have a recommendation in here. Let me just see if I can. Would be that the register owner get copies of the operational plans for the pits. This is condition number 12. And get their consultants to revise the land use compatibility study based on the operational plans. So all they would be doing is that if there were any mitigation measures that were required out of that, that would just be going into the site development plan, would be going into the site the severance agreement. And that's the same thing we did with Miller Lake that the committee chose to approve a handful of months ago. So.
Okay. Derek, did you have one last comment?
It's more of a question specific to this specific topic in terms of development agreement inclusions within some of those peer-reviewed comments related specifically to the land use compatibility assessment comments that came through the peer review through Greer Galloway. There are questions related to specifically the inclusion of the operation plan of F01 or the aggregate source to the south, and not F02. So I'm curious just in terms of staff's requirement for the furnishment of both operational plans, since it wasn't addressed, since F02 was not addressed by the peer reviewer, only F01 was, at least from my understanding of the comments.
So is this something that you could deal with offline with Kim on what's specifically required?
I don't mind providing a quick 20-second response to that. Just so it's clear to everybody.
Sure.
My concern regarding S02, which is the Lachlan pit, is that it's within 1,000 meters of the sensitive land use, and so it's in the influence area. So just that they pull the copy from MNRF and they make sure that nothing changes in terms of their recommendations. I just want to make sure the report recommendations are fulsome. That's all.
Okay, sounds good.
Member McKelvey, before we move on.
Sorry. So number 12 is saying they have to get the operational plans and direct their consultants to revise the land use compatibility assessment. I thought that would only be if they had to have an official plan amendment. So if we're giving provisional approval here today, why would they even have to do that now? I'm wondering if number 12 should come out.
So through the chair, the recommendation to include that is that the land use compatibility assessment they did was based upon Minden Hills official plan policy, which does not conform to the county plan. So it didn't take the county plan into consideration. It also didn't review the operational plan of the actual conflicting land use. So all we're asking is that they take a look at it and make sure that that doesn't change their recommendations, because we can't make that determination as to whether or not it does. We're not noise and sound engineers. So that's my recommendation. The committee can strike or add or do whatever they'd like in terms of conditions.
So again, because we're not supporting the recommendation that they need to have an official plan amendment, I just question whether condition number 12 for these needs to be in there. It's just another study based on the county official plan, but with us doing this today, we're basically indicating it complies. Am I wrong on that?
You're indicating that the committee doesn't have a concern with that regard. Staff have a concern. If the committee doesn't share staff's consideration or concern, then that's where you'd go. We can still require confirmation of things, even if the opinion of the committee is that it conforms.
Ms. Purcell.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. I think a good way of looking at it is that the conditional approval today would mean that they can create the lots. How they're developed would depend on if there's any mitigation measures that would arise from looking at the operational plan. So if a vegetative buffer needed to be maintained along the frontage, so for noise attenuation, or even if it had to be something as structural as a berm or something like that, that in the worst case scenario, if that pit were to be extracted to the limits of the operational plan, even if it wasn't extracted right at the property line, but they had their processing equipment on that north part, what could feasibly be done to ensure that these residences don't have any negative impacts that then the township has to deal with through noise and bylaw complaints. So it wouldn't be that the creation of the lots would be dependent on looking at that operational plan, but just how development happens on the lot might have some impact on the review of the operational plan.
One last before we move on, Derek.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly which direction these comments are going to take the conversation, but upon receiving the copy of the operational plan for F01, I quickly passed that back over to the consultant, and I do not mean to speak on behalf of the consultant. However, the initial comments that did come back were that actually seeing the first initial findings of that operational plan for F01 did more or less solidify their opinions in terms of their findings of compatibility, given that it verified their understanding of where they were assuming that operations were transpiring, as well as the additional depth that they found of the actual mining was so much lower than they were assuming within the report that they would actually lend to the credibility of there being less impact in terms of noise and vibration because it was so much lower than what was initially envisaged within the land use compatibility assessment. So I just leave that as additional comment so everyone has that context. If the requirement is still set in place, we're more than happy to follow up with that.
I believe it was approved with the conditions that are in place. If there's nothing more, thank you very much, everybody. The next application on the agenda is file number H00226 for a lot addition to the lands of Falkenberg. Kim, if you'd like to give us a presentation on it, please.
Sure. And I promise these ones will
Excuse
not.
me, Kim.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know we do have an attendee that is identified as iPhone. I'm not sure if there's a specific application that they're wishing to speak to.
Sure. The user who is iPhone, can you raise your hand if you're Mark Falkenberg? I think it might be Mark Falkenberg because I see Greg's in here otherwise. Yep. Okay, that's Mr. Falkenberg. So we'll get to him later.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. I promise these presentations should hopefully be more brief. Let me share. All right. Here we go. All right, so this is application H00226. This is for the lands of Falkenberg. This is a big parcel. This is part of lot 17, 18, and 19, concession 13 in the township of Sherburne. We're in Algonquin Highlands. The civic address for where the house is on this enormous piece of land is 1313 Crumbie Lake Drive. Our application here is a lot addition to adjoining lands. In terms of our policy, the county official plan here is rural. In the Algonquin Highlands official plan for where the lot additions are taking place is rural. Some of the land to the north, I believe, is waterfront. Some of the lands to the north, I believe, are rural. And then the zoning here, the parent parcel that we're looking at is zoned RU or rural, and the lot additions will be joining lands that are shoreline residential type 2. Our applications for this application, we're enlarging an existing shoreline lot on the shore of Coagama Lake. So our subject lot has an area of 110 hectares with 137 meters of frontage on the lake. We'll be adding kind of a vacant parcel directly to the parcel, I believe, that's the east. The severed lands would remove 2,100 square meters and about 50 meters of straight line frontage. I see that I have 29.5 on the sketch there. The benefiting lot is 1070 Captain's Lane. This is a fairly small lot, little under 2,000 square meters, with 29.6 meters of frontage on Kawagama Lake. This property is occupied currently with a dwelling that's under construction. You'll see that on the appendice to the report. There is a parcel that's down on that lot that's sort of half constructed. So the comments here, the township endorsed this application subject to conditions. We did add a condition to the municipal conditions when we recirculated this to the township. Mr. O'Callahan did note that it does require an amendment to the zoning bylaw because the land that we're adding is actually zoned rural. So we need to add it to the SR2 zone, so the zones are compatible. Otherwise, no planning relief is required for sort of the existing lot. We're enlarging an existing undersized lot, and the existing lot has enough qualifying, or the retained lot, pardon me, has enough qualifying frontage and area for the zone. We haven't received any agency comments to date, and our recommendation is that we approve this application subject to the standard conditions outlined in the staff report. There are just two that I want to highlight for the committee just because they're not our usual conditions. The first is that we have a condition on there that the applicants either apply for a water access only 911 address or they get a legal right of way. The driveway there was put in without the consent of the road owner, and that lot was initially created as a water access lot. So they have an option to do one or the other to kind of to address that. Actually, that was both of them. Yeah. And so basically what happened is they started constructing this building and they were bringing the materials in over the road. So the property's now changed hands and they are looking at resolving some of those incompatibilities. In terms of provincial, county, and local policy, no concerns. We're making an existing lot that's undersized, a little bit larger. Kawagama is not at capacity for development. We have no concerns about wildlife habitat or wetlands or species at risk or anything like that. So this one's a fairly straightforward one. Thank goodness. And I'm just gonna put sharing here.
And do the committee have any questions for Kim?
Okay. And I do believe Mr. Bishop, the agent for the applicant, is here, and I believe the applicant is also here.
Great. Just before we go to Mr. Bishop, Kim, is there a requirement that the shore road allowance on the piece that's being added to the benefiting property be purchased?
To the chair, that was not a recommended condition of consent approval from the Township of Algonquin Highlands. I have seen it 50, one way or the other that happened. Right now, the shoreline of that lot is undeveloped, so there are no structural encroachments. Typically, it's made a condition of consent by the local municipality in scenarios where we do have structural encroachments there. So on that basis, I think that's probably why it wasn't required to be closed. And typically, the Land Division Committee wouldn't impose a condition like that unless it was something the municipality was looking to dispose of that land.
Okay, that's fine then. Mr. Bishop, is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Kim did review the two conditions. It was something that was overlooked by the township, but you've got this application, you got another one coming right after this that has rural lands being added to the shoreline designation. So Mr. Falkenberg's on the line, as you know, there now. We can do that under one application for both severances at the same time, clean that zoning issue up. This property has a 911 address of 1070 that was issued to a previous owner I'm not really saying in error. I mean, it's not really up to the county to prove whether you got access or not. So it should have been It should have always just had a 911 water access, actually. It's changed hands now, and Mr. Falkenberg is in control of the property. That's why there's actually the start of a foundation down there, but they own it. Other family members own it, and they want to add lands to this to make the parcel larger, which is great. It's certainly good for the area to expand those sizes and so on. So I didn't get a chance to talk to Mr. Falkenberg about the right-of-way issue, but bottom line is this. There's a Columbia Lake Cottage Association already in place there that either you get access directly across them or on the township's roads. So it's either two other owners plus Mr. Falkenberg we have to deal with. If not, he can put a driveway in and we just deal with him. And we'll have to have a subsequent application for severance or severances to give this property here proper access. And those will follow these ones in some form.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bishop from the committee? Seeing none, do you want to bring Mark Falkenberg? Does he wish to speak?
Mr. Falkenberg has declined to speak.
Perfect.
Okay. So if there are no further questions from the committee, we have a mover and a seconder for the resolution.
My apologies, Chair Snyder. Mr. Falkenberg had his hand up. Now he doesn't. So I guess he chooses not to speak. Sorry about that.
No problem. Sorry, I missed those movers and seconders. Okay, I think we had moved by Member Kennedy, seconded by Member Donald.
Moved by Member Kennedy, seconded by Member Donald, that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H-00226, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of application for consent H-002-26, subject to the conditions of approval. Oh, I guess we're taking a vote, aren't we? Pardon me. Every time. I apologize. Poor member McKelvey. She looks at my Robert's Rules skills and just shakes her head. So
No problem.
Member McKelvey. Yes. Member Kennedy.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
Okay, that carries. Thank you.
The application is approved subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Are you staying on for us? The next one here. The next application on the agenda is file number H-00326, which is another application for a lot addition for the lands of Falkenberg. Kim, would you like to present that?
Sure. Okay. So the screen will look familiar. This is the same property, the same address, the same zoning, the same official plan designations. So I won't belabor those again. So our lot addition here is to 1100 Captain's Lane. These are folks a little further down the road. The lot area of the subject land here is going to be 109.79 hectares and 87 meters of frontage on Quackama Lake, with the assumption that our previous file was approved. So the Falkenberg property has been developed with a dwelling and a garage, and the severed lands would remove a little under 1,100 square meters to add to the lands to the south. This property shape is sort of hewed in by an existing overhead hydro line. The benefiting lot, which is 1100 Captain's Lane, has a lot area of, sorry, there's a typo on that. It's 1747 square meters. 147 would be a problem, with 30 meters of frontage on Quackama Lake. It's currently occupied by a dwelling and garage, and the septic bag is actually encroaching onto the lands to be severed to be added to the north. There's a raised bed there. Same scenario as the original one. This was a single endorsement from Algonquin Highlands Council. Again, we have added the condition for a zoning bylaw amendment just to to change those rural lands to shoreline residential type 2 lands. The only other kind of a bit of an oddball condition here is it looked like these folks were missing their 911 sign. So the other lot had a 911 sign where it shouldn't be, and this one they didn't have one. So we're going to ask those folks to do it in the hopes of helping our friends in the IT department with their next generation 911 efforts. So those are the only sort of slightly different conditions. Otherwise, these are very straightforward, and this file would be resolving an encroachment of a septic system, which would both improve the zone compliance and compliance with the Ontario Building Code, which staff consider to be a win-win. And I am happy to answer questions should the committee have any.
Any questions from the committee for Kim? Seeing none, Mr. Bishop, is there anything that you would like to add?
Again, almost exactly same conditions. In this case, she does have access, so that can be proved through solicitor or a surveyor to meet that condition. As I mentioned before on the last one, there's an opportunity here to go through one rezoning application that'll catch both properties at the same time for Mr. Falkenberg. So there'll be economy of scale there for him on that application. So no further comment from us.
Thank you. If there's no other questions from the committee, and Mark Falkenberg, is his hand up or down?
Find out.
It is down.
Okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the resolution? Member McKelvey moves, Member Donald seconds.
Moved by Member McKelvey, seconded by Member Donald, that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H-003/26, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of the application for consent H-003/26, subject to the conditions of approval. Now I will proceed to the recorded vote. It only took 3 tries. Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Kennedy. Member Donald.
Yes.
And Deputy Chair Snyder.
Yes.
That carries.
The application is approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. The final application is application number H004/26 for a new waterfront lot for the lands of Bassett. Kim, if you'd like to proceed with your presentation, please.
I think just to the chair,
Oh,
there is one.
Another one. Yes.
And that might be my script I provided you. Led you astray. I apologize.
No,
okay.
there's none.
Okay, let me share my screen for the lands of Bassett. Okay, so application H004-26. This is part of Lot 3, Concession 3 in the geographic township of Glamorgan in the municipality of Highlands East. The civic address for this property is 1030 Mineral Lane. This is the creation of a new waterfront residential lot subject to a right-of-way. The county official plan designates these lands as rural, and the Highlands East official plan designates these lands as both shoreline and rural. So the lands closer to the water or shoreline. The zoning for the whole of the property is LSR, or limited service residential. So we are looking to create a new waterfront lot. This file took quite a bit of time to get to the Land Division Committee. This property did require a local official plan amendment to permit the creation of this lot due to the fact that the applicants intend to convert an existing garage located on the retained lands to a dwelling. The Highlands East official plan does not permit the creation of a new lot that isn't a separation of uses, so isn't a separation of 2 existing dwellings, that isn't subject to a 30-meter setback. So in this scenario, an official plan amendment was required to permit the retained lands to sort of convert that house with a 19-meter setback and to permit the creation of that new lot with the existing cottage on it, subject to a 20-meter setback as well. So the subject property is a little under 4 hectares in area with 134.4 meters of frontage on Salerno Lake. It's been developed with a cottage. There are 2 septic systems and a 1.5-story frame garage. So just for the committee, this is the dwelling, the house, the cottage that they're looking to sever off. This is the garage that they intend to convert to a dwelling unit on the retained lands. Oops. Second stuff. And then the severed lands, the driveway that services that garage passes through it. So that will be subject to a right-of-way to the benefit of the retained lands. So they are severing the land around the cottage and the septic system. It's a little under a hectare, 0.92 hectares in area with 72.7 meters of shoreline frontage. It is subject to a right-of-way over that existing driveway to service the retained lands. And a site evaluation report was prepared to support the application. That's an official plan policy requirement of both the municipality of Highlands East and the county of Haliburton. Is when we're on a waterfront lot, we require an SCR. So just with regard to the retained lands, this is where we have a garage and a septic system. This parcel, so the whole parcel right now doesn't have any frontage on a township road. It's accessed sort of through a number of private roads. I think Chimo Drive to Grandpa's Trail to Mineral Lane. Those familiar with Salerno Lake will understand how that works in there. And so it will be serviced by, it will maintain that existing access and then have the additional right of way to service where this garage will be converted to a dwelling. So the dwelling has a 19.1 meter setback to the high water mark of Salerno Lake, and the septic has a 20.1 meter setback to the high water mark of Salerno Lake. So the Council for the Municipality of Highlands East endorsed this application subject to conditions. The pre-consultation report was written by, this really clever planner that was me when I worked there prior to coming to the county. So I am fairly familiar with the municipal conditions on here. Most of them are fairly sort of standard or boilerplate ones. So because we have had an environmental report drafted, which provides some recommendations in terms of not expanding within 30 meters of the lake, and some revegetation along the shoreline of the severed and retained lot. This will require a severance agreement or a site plan agreement, depending on which section of the Planning Act the applicant or the township decides to use there. They have been asked to prepare a surveyor's real property report for the severed and retained. They have an updated site development plan, so it's more of a formatting thing there. And then they are also required to prepare a site plan that will illustrate the replanting recommendations of the site evaluation report. So often a site evaluation report will actually include its own little site plan that shows the replanting. In the case of this site evaluation report, they just provided sort of written bullet point recommendations in terms of the replanting. So we've asked that the site development plan be updated to illustrate kind of what that's going to look like so that you can appropriately attach it to a site plan agreement or a severance agreement. There is a slight amendment to the condition. So the original conditions, condition 8 and condition 9, required a landscape plan, which is typically prepared by a landscape architect. Back before this application came forward, we did advise that the surveyor could prepare the site plan and have Mr. Nielsen, the environmental professional, sign off on it, so we didn't have to get another professional involved here. Condition number 8 reflects site plan. Condition number 9, I totally missed it. I need to revise the recommendations of the site evaluation report and the landscape plan. It's going to be the recommendations of the site evaluation report and the site plan, which the resolution would be sort of the conditions as amended if council or if the committee chose to go forward on that basis. It does require an amendment to the zoning bylaw. This will put into place that sort of limitation on as of right expansion of those structures within 30 meters of the lake, which is a recommendation of the site evaluation report. It also includes a temporary use bylaw to permit the garage to sort of exist on that site for 3 years. It's required to be converted to its new residential use within a 3-year period. And then all of your standard county conditions that we have proof of legal access to satisfy section 7.15 of the official plan, the survey requirements, the deeds, etc. So staff recommend approval. I'm happy to answer any questions if the committee has them. And I do believe Ms. Harrison, who is the planner for the applicants, is also in attendance.
Thank you, Kim. Are there any questions from the committee for Kim? Seeing none, can we bring Ms. Harrison forward, please? There, we can see you.
All right, I'm here.
Yeah, have you any additional comments that you'd like to make, please?
Through you, Deputy Chair Snyder, and to the committee members. I'm Sue Harrison. I'm the authorized agent for the property owners, Darlene and Terry Bissett. Ms. Bishop has given you a very thorough overview of the application and the recommendations. I agree with the word change that she proposes for condition 9, and we agree with the recommendation as it's proposed. I'm fully respect the committee's time, and I don't wish to repeat anything you've already heard. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, I'm done.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, Kim, could I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Moved by Member Kennedy, seconded by Member McKelvey.
Moved by Member Kennedy, seconded by Member McKelvey, that the Land Division Committee of the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H-00426, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of the application for consent H-004-26, subject to the conditions of approval as amended. Oh yeah, I'm going to read the vote now. Tammy can't believe this. Member McKelvey.
I'm sorry. I'm probably making you nervous or something. It's no big deal. I'm a yes.
Member Kennedy.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Member Snyder.
Yes.
That carries.
The application's approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report, and the conditions as amended.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harris. The next application, which is the last application on the agenda, is file number H005/26 for an addition to adjoining lands for the lands of Wayne Taylor. Kim, could you make your presentation, please?
And will I make it speedy? Absolutely. So this is our final application, H-00526. This is for lands located in part of lot 29, concession 12, in the geographic township of Guilford in the municipality of Dysart et al. Our subject lands are vacant, but they are located at the intersection of Boyce Bradley Drive and Merganser Lane. Their proposal here is a lot addition to adjoining lands. The county's official plan of policy remains rural, and the Dysart et al. Official plan policy is split between the waterfront areas and the rural lands. The zoning here, we're looking at an RU1L, so rural type 1L for the backlands, and a WR4L, waterfront residential type 4L, for the lands fronting onto Redstone Lake. So our subject property has an area of a little less than 6 hectares with 9 meters of frontage on Redstone Lake. The lands are vacant. The property owners who own this parcel are actually waterfront owners elsewhere, a little further up the road, and they use this as sort of a passive recreational type of property. There is no public road frontage. Access here is via the registered private right-of-way. That's Boyce Bradley Drive, back out to either Haliburton Lake Road or, if the conditions permit, north to Redkin. The severed lands here, it's about 800 square meters of shoreline frontage to add to the adjoining lot to the north, which I believe is 1006 Merganser Lane. The land is being transferred to the adjoining owner for two reasons. One, that sort of area of frontage, that 9 meters, is not appropriate for docking. So as the members are probably aware, municipalities do have zoning bylaws that have setbacks for how far your dock has to be from the side lot line. When you have 9 meters, it's awfully hard to meet those setback requirements. The area in there is also marshy. There's a stream that flows through and into that little bay that you can see. This will be added to a piece of land that's already fully developed. There is a dwelling, your standard waterfront accessories. I believe they have a shed, and there is an existing docking envelope on the property. The property owners of the retained lands will be rezoning this to an open space conservation use or a parkland type use that will not permit residential development. This is required because the Dysart et al. Official plan does not permit the creation of backlots on private roads, and it also requires those backlots to be, I believe 40 acres in area. So we're not quite big enough either. So in this scenario, they are proposing to make this sort of a recreational use, whether they were to hike or hunt or any picnic on it, that kind of thing. Those things would be permitted, and as such, a condition to that effect has been added at the recommendation of the planner for the municipality of Dysart et al. Dysart et al. Council endorsed the application subject to conditions. We have not received any agency or public comments to date, and the staff recommendation here is that provisional consent be granted, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Happy to answer any questions, and I believe Mr. Bishop is here to represent this file as well.
Does committee have any questions for Kim? Seeing none, can we bring Greg Bishop forward? Mr. Bishop, anything you'd like to add?
Not at all. Kim laid it out well. Chair Snyder there. Yeah, the rezoning is required because the minimum is 30 acres and it has to have township frontage. So this was the way we could get around the OP policies and so on and still make the lands better in our mind. Add the little chunk that's not really of any value to the neighbor next door, and then sterilize the piece back and behind, which will make everybody along the lakefront happy. The development back there, which right now they have as of right development rights there, because there's not enough room to build on the little sliver we're adding. So it's all around better for all from a planning perspective.
Yep. Very good. Any questions for Mr. Bishop from the committee? Seeing none, can I have a mover and a seconder for the motion? Moved by member Kennedy, seconded by member Donald.
Moved by member Kennedy, seconded by member Donald, that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton receive the report related to application for consent H-005/26, and that the Land Division Committee for the County of Haliburton grant provisional approval of the application for consent H-005/26, subject to the conditions of approval. And I will ask for a recorded vote. Member McKelvey.
Yes.
Member Kennedy.
Yes.
Member Donald.
Yes.
Deputy Chair Snyder.
Yes.
Thank you. That carries.
The application is approved, subject to the conditions outlined in the staff report. Thank you very much. That's a good application. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
That ends the applications. Written notice of the committee's decisions for all applications heard today will be provided in accordance with the Planning Act. There's a 20-day appeal period following the date of the decision, during which any prescribed person or public body may appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Is there any other business for discussion today, Kim?
Yes, through you, Deputy Chair. So we do have a couple of applications that are in process. We are hoping that they will be able to hit our May 11th meeting agenda. We're just doing some final reviews and determining whether or not some of them need a peer review or not. We did want to bring forward a discussion regarding the sort of notice to the committee with regard to planning reports and the agenda being released. So currently, the Land Division Committee agenda is released on a schedule as determined, I believe, by the county's procedural bylaw. We release it sort of 2 days prior to the application. So as of right now, that's kind of, it's going out on Thursdays. The committee has, some members of the committee have expressed a desire to get a little bit of earlier notice, so they have more opportunity to review the reports and provide their comments, go out and do site visits, that sort of thing. And the director of planning and I completely understand and acknowledge that as a municipal councillor or a public member, you're all balancing different various priorities. So one thing to note is that the statutory requirement to give notice, so that is us sort of posting our notice on site and sending out our circulation in the mail, is 14 days. That's a pretty tight it's a pretty tight turnaround. If the committee has a desire to get something a little bit earlier, we may have to make some changes to some of our internal processes to issue those notices earlier. I only say that because typically we do the site visits the same day we go out to post notices, because our county is vast. And for example, for these 7 applications, there's about 7 hours of driving from site to site to take a look at them. So we'd rather not do that twice in terms of sort of making sure that we're making good use of our time. So I believe there was a little bit of discussion back and forth. Certainly we're happy to hear kind of how much additional notice the committee would desire to see. And we're happy to sort of see what we need to change internally. We do want to make sure that we're not providing things so early that we're not having time to receive public and agency comments. Just because even though they can be provided up to the day of the meeting, to be clear, sometimes those agency comments, whether they come from the Ministry of Transportation or a conservation authority, if we're in the east end of our county, they can sometimes have a material impact on sort of the recommendations of the staff report. So that's kind of the only caveat or pleading of case that I'm going to make on that regard, and I'd be happy to hear from the committee otherwise.
I'm wondering if it would help committee if when there's an application that is, shall we say, fairly meaty, whether we're just simply given a heads up that we can expect, on Thursday, something that's going to require a bit more than the usual time to review. I don't know whether committee would be happy with that, or they would like to have more time. Member McKelvin?
If I'm the one that brought this up, I just, I mean, for the most part, these applications are fairly straightforward, and there's not a lot of work in the review. When you get one like the Hicks file that, just trying to bring it back up again to see 419 pages, and I realize a lot of them are duplications, but I just found it took a lot of my time. I didn't see the email Thursday night, so I didn't see it till Friday. I had other obligations, so it made it a little tight for me. But I realized that for the most part, we don't get those sorts of time requirements of us. But if we are going to, maybe you could send out some of the detailed reports to us ahead of time, or something that just makes it a little easier to digest and fill in our time.
Speak to that.
Yeah.
So through the deputy chair, completely understand. Everybody loves opening the email attachment of 450 pages. So we appreciate and we understand. I am wondering, so the staff do have some concerns with just sort of like providing like the raw materials without any of the kind of context coming in the turn with regards to the planning report. Just because again, it is a lot of information and sometimes it's conflicting information. So have no problem providing a heads up sort of with these scenarios where we happen to have what appears to be, whether it's a meteor application or perhaps a contentious application, just letting the committee know, and maybe doing sort of our darndest to get it out a couple of days beforehand in that scenario, if that is helpful to the committee. Because yeah, for the most part, they're like the other applications, you know, we considered today, which were pretty cut and dry and pretty straightforward. So I mean, if that would sort of as a go forward for the committee satisfy that, you know, in those scenarios, we will try to provide the copies of the planning report and sort of agenda attachments a little bit ahead of time, so that when the agenda is published on Thursday, where we've had some ones that require a couple of hours of sitting down and crossing one eyes, looking at all of these various reports and studies, you know, you've had a little bit of time to look at and digest those ones before you look at the more straightforward ones. Is that reasonable to the committee?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So I don't think we need a resolution to that effect. We'll just make that a standard operating procedure if that's all right for the committee.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We appreciate you.
Anything else that needs to be discussed, Kim?
No. So I will let the committee know once we've got a firm application for May 11th. That will be pretty soon because again, that's 4 weeks from now. So we do have a couple that are in but may not be complete, but I will let you know. And if they require additional consideration, I'll give a heads up and get that planning report done a little further ahead of time so committee can review. Otherwise, I think, you know, we've taken 2.5 hours of your time. We appreciate it.
So can I just check the May 11th date is fine with the other committee members? I do have a conflict on that day. It may resolve. Or it may not, I don't know. I'm at an all-day, supposed to be at an all-day conference that day, so it may get moved, I don't know. I'll let you know if I'm not able to attend.
And I'll confirm with Chair Danielson that she's able to attend. And if either of you are not able to attend, and the files aren't particularly pressing, we may ask the applicants if they're comfortable moving it to the June meeting. So, but we'll let you know with lots of notice.
If there's no further business, may I have a motion to move to adjourn the meeting? Member Kennedy, Member Donald, I don't know that we need a seconder. All in favor?
Okay, so
meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy.
So sorry, I'm just confirming. Kennedy and Donald moved.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Perfect. I don't want my minutes to be wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks, committee. Have a
everybody.
nice
Bye, everybody.
afternoon.